All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the September 20th Notary Governance Call. Let's take a quick look at what we have planned as far as topics on this go. Typically, at a very high level, we share this agenda. We kind of modify it. Sometimes we take time for metrics. Sometimes we take time for other things. This call, we have a lot of discussions around the proposals, the FIPs, and the elections. So if you would like to see the metrics, we leave those links posted in the Starboard and registry dashboard. I could share those again, but we're going to carve out a little bit more time on this call for the proposal discussions and some of the updates that feels. So metrics, you can take a look on your own as we go through it. Friendly hello if you're joining the call or haven't seen us for a while. Oops, sorry. There are four of us that make up the Notary Governance team. Deep, Galen, myself, and RG. You could tap us for any respective things that you may see on this list, and we'll be happy to back you up and provide support. One quick caveat is that Galen might have delayed comms over the next couple of weeks. So if you do send a message to Galen, I recommend that you CC myself, and I'll be sure to help fast track that for you as we go forward on that. And also, if you're on the call right now and you're going to share or present, it's really helpful to change your name. I'll do it on myself right now. If I click on my profile picture and I hit edit rename, I can then change it from just saying Kevin to putting the organization I'm behind, like Filecoin Foundation. And this way, if we have this recording and someone watches, it's a lot easier for them to link the questions to who is asking it, as well as us to allocate stick time. Obviously, totally optional as you go forward on that. Just makes it a little bit easier. I'm also going to drop the link to the Airtable form. We use this for the registry on signing up. So if you see this come through in chat, go through and, oh, Deep beat me. Deep, you're too wonderful. You can go in there and put that for the 20th on this morning session, and we'll get that logged over for SLA. So with that, let's take a quick look at the first topic, which is updates on the fourth round of notary election. So coming on board, we have a general timeline mapped out. Starting in October, we are going to provide more and more tactical and detailed updates on the coming election. And then in Phil Lispin coming up at the beginning of November, end of October, we're going to have a specific session, and that session will be designed to answer any remaining questions about the program, answer any Q&A that may come from this, and get anybody who may be thinking about putting in a renewal or a first-time application to update with information. Then starting on November 1st, we're going to open up the timeline for applications to be submitted. In past election cycles, we kept this period around 2 weeks, and the feedback was having a couple extra days would make this easier on everybody. So you'll notice that time frame has gone from around 10 days up to 16 to give you more time to get the application in. After that, we allocate another 3 weeks for what we call scoring and review questions. So if you turn in an application and we have questions or we need any kind of clarification, another feedback we got on the election cycle was the turnaround time needed was just so quick that it made it stressful. So hopefully this way we can have a few weeks, give you time to not just put in your application, but be ready for any updates. Then we plan to announce the next round of notaries added to this group on December 9th and have dedicated sessions the week of the 12th through the 23rd before the end of the year for tactical onboarding to go through it on that. So just as a heads up, that'll be kicking off. And then as a very just kind of introduction to the program, we're going to be rolling out some changes with the scoring sheet and the levels of notaries. We'll get into this at more of a strategic and tactical level on the next couple of calls, but just to kind of kickstart the conversation, we're looking at how scoring participates with like just the SLAs, as well as what does it mean to be a notary? Is there a world in which we have different tiers of responsibility for these notaries and what they're participating in, and then adjusting the scores accordingly? Meaning there might be someone that just wants to participate in the governance, not approve data cap, but have a voice, have a say. Do we score their application in a different way than we do someone that's like, I'm going to be approving LDN big applications? So we're going to be drawing out what that proposal looks like and sharing that on the next call. But just at a high level, I hope what you're taking away is the fourth election is getting ready to kick off, and that'll start here at the last week of October, and then the election kicks off. I'll pause and see if anybody has any questions before we move on. All right. So this is the big agenda that we have, and I'm just going to give a quick high level overview, and then we might just cut into different responsible parties as we go through it right now. So right off the bat, we're going to start with the two FIPs. We've talked about these on the last two governance calls, FIPS 36 and FIP 45. These have had a lot of discussion. So there was a last call that was issued. Wanted to make sure that that was on everyone's radar and that you were having a takeaway for it. Second, we have two guest speakers that are joining us that are going to talk about their programs. Kevin Z will give an update on E-Fil Plus, and RG is here to kind of walk us through some trust and transparency updates for us as well. Then as far as proposals, we've had 4 big proposals that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks, hoping just like the FIPS to give these one last voice before we start to sunset these into a final decision. So lots of time allocated for discussions around the issues that you see. This slide deck has been linked in Slack. So if you're the kind of personality that likes to have this in front of you or pull this up, please jump into the Phil Plus channel on the public Slack and you'll see all this listed. And then one late item add is an update from Beacon. So we'll add that to this list at the top of the hour. And then we had one LDN application. I'll share their video so you can watch it for the notaries on the call. And then if anybody has questions, we'll give them a chance to kind of allocate and address anything as we go forward. So with that, Deep, if it's okay, I'd like to hand the floor over to you to kind of give any updates you have on the FIPS, or happy to kind of put a bow on this myself. Your call.
Yeah, I mean, I think the very simple updates for both of them. For FIP 36, this is the segregation multiplier being introduced into the calculation for quality adjustment. This is actually now at the stage of a vote. So if you're interested, I mean, take a look at the FIP, of course, and the content for it. But I'm actually just going to link off to Phil poll here because that is sort of the next step for where it's at. If you're not familiar, Phil poll is a website where you can effectively use your on-chain identity to vote on FIPs. Poll number 16 is for FIP 36. I just dropped a link in the chat. Check it out and go participate and see the latest stats on where that's at. FIP 45 is looking closer and closer to sort of being merged. At this point, I think it's considered relatively not controversial. I had a couple of comments and us on the team last week when we sat down, we went together and clarified a lot of our understanding with the actors team. And so we might be making some changes to the draft to improve some aspects of readability, but overall it's looking in good shape in terms of like what the intent is and what the goals are. It's not as readable, but it is still useful content. And so I'm pasting a link into the latest effectively. If you have the time, please skim it and ask whatever questions you have. But effectively, the goal there is, proceeding with a change that introduces or creates dependencies for future changes, but doesn't actually change anything right now, and is unlikely to actually change the way in which data cap is distributed and used for even like, one or at least one, realistically 2 network upgrades. And so we're talking like Q2 of next year, realistically. So even for like the next 6 months, I would imagine like things are going to stay largely the same. I see a question in chat. According to Lotus, the maximum sector duration is 540 days. If a client wants to store data for 540 days, while the minor's sector duration is 360 days, what happens when the sectors expire? Haley, you can't store a deal in a sector that's going to expire before the deal ends. So either you're going to go into a sector extension scenario where you're extending the life of the sector to match the deal, or you're not going to put it in that sector. You'll put it in a sector where it can actually be stored. Your second question: as the deal is about to expire, the client wants to extend the deal, and the SP agrees to do so. Would the power decrease? This is interesting. So if a deal is being extended, the mechanism for this doesn't exist today in a way that the deal extension is verified. So yes, if you're just going to extend the deal with whatever inbuilt stuff there is, not with FIP 45 passed, then yes, the QAP adjustment will drop because there's no way to apply net new data cap for that. And so with FIP 45 though, you would have the same quality adjustment. And so it would continue to provide 10x. Without FIP45, the client would have to go get more data cap and issue a new deal. And so it would still be easier because the data transfer would not be required because the SP already has the CID, but it would not be like the super cheap extension with QAP, at least to my understanding. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's accurate. There's another question on, is there any poll link for FIP45? No, there's no poll for 45. In general, it wasn't nearly as controversial, and the poll has only been really pulled out a handful of times. But Eric, I mean, if you have any suggestions, agreements, or disagreements with it, please feel free to post directly as an issue in the repo itself or on one of the newer PRs. It would be great. Yeah, I think, Eric, that is the plan right now. I think 23rd is the last call. The signaling that we're getting from the core devs is that they're pretty confident that it can make it to V17. So ideally, yes. Cool. I can continue to take questions in chat, Kara, if you want to keep going.
Sounds good. RG, I'll pass it over to you, bud.
Yeah, so the main update on the trust and transparency side is we stood up the working group for trust and transparency. And if there are any proposals or discussions related to data cap abuse, it'd be great if you can start the discussion in this channel. If the link is here, if you are not in the channel yet. We're also looking to hold bi-weekly calls. I didn't want to kind of propose a time right away. So what I'll be doing is setting out a short survey to get a sense what times work. I'll also be looking for potentially 2 volunteer moderators, because the goal of this working group is sort of for the community to come together and discuss. So I don't want to be like kind of take a top-down approach where I'm kind of telling the community what to do. And so just be on the lookout for that. Other than that, we again, just as a flag, some of the issues that I've raised in the Fil Plus channel broadly about the kind of issues we're facing. So please go look at them. You're more than welcome to contribute to open data LDN issues. That is always welcome. But yes, if there's specific concerns that you have related to data cap abuse, please reach out to me or post in this channel.
Sweet. KZ.
All right. Thanks, K-Ray. Hi, everyone. I'm KZ, for those of you I haven't interacted with yet. I work for Protocol Labs on the client growth team, and I've been put in charge as project manager for the E-Fil Plus project. Over the past few months, behind the scenes, we've been working on the planning phase for this pilot, putting together details of how it will work, what processes were needed to better enable onboarding of private data, and how we can better support SPs who are looking to onboard new clients. So yesterday I posted a modification in the GitHub repo with the details that I'm proposing to be part of the pilot. So without going through everything, and I recommend everyone to go to the modification and read through the proposal. But we talked through a lot of this behind the scenes with the Notary working group, with SPs who've applied. We've sort of gained consensus on the need to check the business and the data owner a little bit more thoroughly before approving applications for data cap. So the processes we've added are a KYB, a know your business check, and also a registration form for the data owner to sort of share more details about who they are and what their plan is, since we won't necessarily be able to see the data at all. Additionally, we focused on providing more efficiency in approvals. That's been a lot of feedback and thoughts that people have had about not only this process, but also just Fil Plus in general. So we really want to pilot this idea of having notaries be auto-assigned that are part of the working group to approve the applications. So my hope with all of this is that by having more details on the data owner and the business, by having them provide significantly more detail in the application through the exceptions form about the distribution plan, the details of the project, as much information as they can provide, that will provide a higher level of trust that the notaries can go and build off of to either approve or decline an application. Let me see if there's any questions here. Oh, okay, that was something else. So yeah, anyway, just to sum this up, so I would love everyone to read through this, provide some feedback on the proposal in the GitHub repo. I'll be starting working group calls bi-weekly. It'll actually be the same time as this call every other Tuesday. So next Tuesday will be the first call at 11 a.m. Eastern, and there'll also be an evening call for the other time zones to sort of act as open office hours. My job as part of this project is to lead and support the SPs who are applying. We can have community members come on and express ideas or issues. I'd love to be similar to the way RG explained his working group. I'd love it to be, run by the community and bringing ideas and thoughts and working together as a group to help push applications through and make this a successful program. So the plan is to kick this off in the next few weeks. In October, we have SPs who've applied that will get started with the program. And over the next few months, we'll continue to assess how it's going. I'll provide updates on the governance calls. We'll hold the working group calls. We have a separate working group Slack channel that we'll continue to provide updates on. So I'll stop there for now. See if there's any questions or comments.
Oh, can you share the link to the chat?
The link to the Slack channel?
Yeah, also maybe here.
Sure, will do.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Do you want
Karen.
the
Thanks,
link
Karen.
for the Slack channel or the GitHub issue that or discussion that is happening?
Both links are on the slide on the screen. So if you have access to the presentation, you can see calendar and also the issue.
Yeah, I'll send them in chat just to help.
Thanks, Alessandro.
Sweet. So we now have 4 proposals, and just like the FIPs, the hope is to give these one last breath of air before we close these out based off feedback and action items. So I think I'll take this first one since I'm the one that raised it. So as a refresher, this one comes to us back from like late August. And what was happening was we had 2 very active notaries that did not need a refresh on their data cap. So they did not reapply in the 3rd round of elections. And because of that, they did not sign the new authorization and reporting for the LDN v3, which means that they could not sign those. So this proposal was, how are we as a community and how is the government's team dealing with technological updates that may come through? And then a lot of the discussion that came from this issue from the community was, hey, we need to make sure that we're not prioritizing people that may have intentionally not participated or intentionally been dropped off due to this. So I wanted to kind of provide some color that I saw in discussions on this and then kind of put one final thought as before we close this out. First, the question came up, were these 2 notaries people that had reapplied and then been denied? And the answer is no. And then the second was, maybe we asked these 2 notaries if they'd feel comfortable just coming forward, sharing a little bit about themselves. Neither of them thought that it was something that they want to lift. They will just reapply and kind of stay behind the scenes. So I'm going to close this issue out, not add the 2 second-round notaries onto the multi-sig. But one of the things that I'll be leaving a comment on is probably in the next round of elections, baking in some wording that if you do not reapply, it's not like it's going to block you from receiving technical updates that we make in order to make the notary process a little bit simpler. So I wanted to share that, give a final round of input or thoughts before we put that close button on this issue. All right, this one is pretty straightforward. If anything comes to light, I'll leave it up for the next couple of days. Feel free to comment on 568. All right, next one was 587. I know that these were a kind of a batch from you, Carolina. Do you want to kick this off and then I'll kind of circle up?
Yeah, I can do that. Okay, guys, too early for you guys and it's too late for me. So the reason why I'm back into this is because a company called New Ads was asking why their application doesn't get approved in Slack. But they said they did what exactly the governance team suggested them, which is like 5 notary support. That makes me wonder if it's right to have encrypted data set has the same requirement. And from what I saw, I don't think, just personally, I don't think they did answer notary's question properly. I don't know if that would be considered as enough transparency. Like for private data, I think it needs better to improve the credibility of the application. I did some recap on the link itself. I think it would be better to get some community input. Yeah, that's pretty much it, Kevin.
Does anybody have any thoughts or discussion on this one?
I guess I'll take a look today and see if I have any input on that.
I mean, I think this one, it also introduces just a bunch of just clarification of things that we have as assumptions. And at the very least, my current opinion on it is at the very least, we should include some of this stuff in the documentation for the LDN process. Even if we include it as precedents and not as formal requirement. Caro, part of why it hasn't been added like that is because we, number one, we weren't sure what the changes might be that we introduced to the E-Fil Plus working group. And the second was we didn't know how many of these types of cases we would even see in the immediate term. But given that we're seeing even more of these, might not be a bad idea to just integrate this in, I think, right? So it could be interesting to just see if we can at the very least state some of these things as basic, baseline requirements. RG, I don't know if you have an opinion, but to me, this seems relatively reasonable. I don't really know the implication of the number of nodes side of things, but overall, it seems relatively reasonable.
I think I put some link in the application itself, like the encrypted data right now at the moment posted in the Notary governance channel. It's like 4 or 5, it's not much.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'll make one comment based on feedback I've received when we were talking about the number of notaries required to approve for the E-Fil pilot. So a lot of the SPs involved are not excited to have, we talked about having, all of the notaries in the working group approve applications, could be upwards of 12 plus, right? But
Yeah.
Not only is that time consuming, but also the SPs aren't looking to have X number of notaries knowing who the clients are and what the data is. So my goal with our project is to, present the notaries that are checking with as much data as they can to support the approvals, and also eliminate any notaries that are involved in any of those projects. So they disincluded themselves if they are, and we'll still have at least 2 to go through and approve an application. But when you get above 5, it starts to become, I don't know, interesting.
Yeah, what I was thinking about this is, Filecoin, the notaries, it's like a small circle. Everyone basically, everyone knows everyone in certain region, and the 5 notaries doesn't stop from collusion. That's what I think. It's it would be nice to see, people sharing opinions about this, but I don't think I have got enough feedback. That's why I'm bringing it up here.
Good flag. It sounds like if there's any discussions, we'll check it out. And maybe what we just kind of say is that we'll give this one more week. Whatever feedback we've collected, we'll move forward with. Appreciate you flagging that. The next one is a little bit about the LDN rules and applications. Similar, I know that you flagged this one as well. Would you like to kind of bring this up and provide an update as of this post 7 days ago?
Yes, I would love to that. About 602 LDN versus application. 1 second. Yeah. I actually brought up like 3 proposals, right? Like personally, I think the most risk-free one is this one. Like the notaries should circumvent the project that they enjoy, that they share partnership with other SPs, join as SPs by themselves. I did some recap on the proposal itself as well. And I think I have said already a lot in the proposal, and it would be nice to have people, check it out. And do you mind jump into the application itself? Thanks. There might be some misunderstanding from certain notaries that they think this one is kind of blocks notaries to work in the community as SP as well. Could you go down a bit? Yeah, thanks. A tiny bit more. But yeah, the recap part. Like the disadvantage from what I saw is we cannot completely prevent collusion, as what I mentioned before, and a potential self-dealing. But the good part is it does limit self-dealing and reduce disputes. Like people are arguing about some, as SP and notary, why would you join both application, right? It doesn't seem fair. Like if one SP in the community doesn't have the role as notary, they would actually see that as unfair. That's the same thing for me. If I see someone sign their own applications, it doesn't make sense. That's why I brought it up. Yeah.
I guess, go on, RG.
So I think the proposal is great. I think one of the things is it comes down to enforcement of this, right? I think it'd be good to have this as a guideline, but at the end of the day, how do we make sure? Because I think, there's been a discussion in the community about what is really the incentive for a notary, right? And I think we don't really have explicit incentives today. And one of the incentives for the notary is, among other things, so like they might be like FIL holders, or they might have an interest in the success of the program. I think in that, knowing that, I think it can be a bit difficult to kind of start policing this in some sense. And I think so. Like I agree with the proposal that we should have proper information, but I don't know how exactly can we enforce this right off. And I would love to hear if you had any thoughts or suggestions on that front.
I got your point, RG. I think the same. Like notaries, they can make their connections public or not. That's their personal choice. But like in the links I shared below, they're actually applicant that they share the SPs that they're gonna be working with in the certain application. I mean, how to enforce it, it's a good question, but the better term would be like how to at least prevent some application, for better credibility. That's what I think. If you check the link below, you can understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
No, I was saying like if we think that this, if the community feels that this will eventually prevent, especially with the next round of notary elections coming in.
Yeah.
We're more than happy to. I think it makes sense to put this as like a overarching guideline to kind of signal to the community that this is something we care about, and then I think we can reference this as once it becomes part of the guidelines, as in the process of doing due diligence and Q&A. The tricky thing there is the due diligence is done by the notaries, and so just the way the program is structured today, and so it can be a bit tricky to kind of put the gun on the head of the person holding the gun, right, so to say. And so yeah, but I agree that this would be a great addition to the guidelines, and yeah, if the community feels collectively that we should start signaling more, which I am in the favor of, then we should go ahead.
Yeah, I absolutely get your point. And there's another point that I would like to add in. It's like we have a lot of notaries, like 50 something.
Yeah.
One notary's absence won't stop the application from, get approved. That's the most important part of it. It will not reduce the overall power of the network. That's what I think. It will certainly not do that. Yeah. And Alex, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I guess this one is right now we can't actually like do the actually make the system to track and do all of this, but I guess we can use this as like Carrie G said, using it as a guideline and as a principle, and then trying to figure out, like, doing discussions and doing some brainstorming around how we can do this for the next election, and then how we can actually track this, and how, like, we gotta start, I guess, planning on how this kind of system would work, how we can track the relationships and how we can update the relationships. So if you want to change some of your nodes, and how can you penalize if you don't update that, and how should we deal with nodes that aren't included in when you update, like, your node. So we'll probably have a system for that. So I guess we can use that as a way of discussing how the future will look like, how the system would work. And I guess this is something that I guess will be facilitated by some of the upgrades of Filecoin itself, when DataCap becomes a token, and you can actually tie that token to some deal or some whatever, and then you can do some operations, like, from the system standpoint, where you can track and actually lock when it's going to whatever node is not connected to the one you said you're gonna use, and whatnot. So yeah, I guess using that as a discussion topic, and using that as a way of planning for how the system will look like is a good idea and a good thing to do.
I just want to flag a couple of things. The tokenization of DataCap is not actually resulting in it being like a purchasable asset or an exchangeable asset that way. Alex, you should go check out the FIP. And I actually think that would be like pretty bad, because it would create like a disassociation between the actual client and the project and what the DataCap was given for. So we don't want that. Generally, the minting of it in a way that it can be predicted on how it's going to be used is where the value add comes in. And we will get that with FIP 45. So your philosophy is accurate. I agree with where you're coming from. Just your choice of words is, there's some parts of that are dangerous. And so I'm just flagging that. Carol, I've been thinking about this one a lot. And I feel like if you can come up with a good way to implement this in a way that it doesn't significantly impact applications that are trying to do the right thing, where the notaries themselves, even though they're SPs, are actually benefiting the network, I would be supportive. But my feeling today is that actually I don't think it makes sense to do this because of two reasons. Number one, I think the role of the notary itself needs to change a little bit over time, right? Like, we have talked about this idea that notaries need to evolve from being gatekeepers to guardians. And so that's a change that I think will also reduce the liability that comes from this kind of outcome specifically. is effectively putting notaries in a position where the expectation is the work that they're doing is specifically for the delivery of abuse cases or handling of due diligence in the case where there's high risk. And when that happens, it won't actually matter that much what their other stakeholder roles are. What will matter is the quality of the work that they deliver when they're called upon. And so I think the system needs to design for situations where notaries themselves have less leverage up front and more leverage over time, at which point it will start to matter less and less if they're actually involved in the deal making, and matter more the quality of the work they do, the rate of their execution, and the likelihood that their output is similar to other outputs in the network. And I would say you should think about this the way networks think about validator nodes. Validator nodes sometimes also do compute, and that's fine as long as the validation itself is useful and aligns with several other pieces of validation being done in the network. And so I don't actually know if, and this is kind of born of the idea that I think it's really hard to figure out how to identify links between entities, because people will just invent new ways anyway. Like if anybody's looking to abuse the system, they're going to do it. You'll never beat them.
Yeah,
Not in this game. And so for me, then it turns into more like, hey, philosophically, how are we handling the notary role? And is it actually that bad of a thing? And the more I think about it, I actually think it's okay for a notary to be an SP. What we should instead do is force more notaries to be part of the decision to reduce the leverage provided by an individual notary, or shift that notary role to come later in the line to act more on the due diligence and the abuse cases rather than on every single application. And I think those are better long-term directions than trying to do this, because I think this will just, it will work for a few weeks, and then the people that want to cheat the system will easily cheat the system.
Yeah, I do agree with what you said, but there's a point I don't get. Like, being a notary means you don't have income, right? You don't get nothing from that. But as SPs, you get power of tokens or files, whatever you call it. I don't get why they have to take two roles at the same time. I mean, if the application is genuine, there are 50 something notaries left. They could absolutely get support from that. But
Yes.
The disputes around the community is too much. Like they are SPs applying on behalf of their clients, and they sign it by themselves. That's the part I'm super not in favor about.
Yeah, because you have a storage provider who's a client, a storage provider who's a notary, and the same storage provider.
Everything gets complicated. As long as you are only taking one row in one application, I think it will make the community like way more peaceful. Like people don't argue about this kind of stuff all around.
I don't disagree at all. I just think it's not possible. It's just straight up not possible, right?
Because like this application, sorry, again, it's not to force notaries to make their notes public or their connections, not at all. Just for the applications that they mention is themselves. Like if I'm not a company, but if I'm a company, I applied it on behalf of my client, and I make the application and assign it. That's gonna be
yes. If you are applying,
like in the community.
Yes. I think if you're facilitating the client, then I mean, if you own the actual application, then it's really hard to. So in a way, it's like there's 3 roles in every application. We don't want somebody playing all 3, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's nonsense.
Which is different than being notary and SP though, because what we've seen in the past is that there are notaries
applying on behalf of their client as well, then join as a SP. So basically, it's the same.
Yeah, so I mean, if the final recommendation is put documentation language that says it's against the policy of the program to participate in every single role in the value proposition of an LDN flow, so like don't be the client and the notary and the SP. I think that's a reasonable piece to put into documentation. I just think it'll be harder to action, but that at least gives us something that if we do catch a case of it, then we can take that up as a dispute, remove that notary, and like find some ways to reprimand in the future. I think that is a more concrete proposal, and I think that is what we should probably take forward and see what people have to say. I think taking it down to 2 roles is really difficult, but if we were to say you cannot be all 3, I think that's a good starting point.
There's a question from Sabrina. I guess only taking 2 rows on application is the conscience right now, isn't it? Like that's not the intention from my proposal. I would like to have, if you are SPs working on the same project, you can, use your connections, invite other notaries to sign for you, but I prefer not to have them directly involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
I think so. So this again, I just want to. This came up like when we were first designing the LDN process, and what we thought then was that hey, there's like you're saying, right? There's enough other notaries.
Mm-hmm.
But the approach that we took was slightly different, which is because there's enough other notaries, it should be easy to detect if there's something going wrong as well. Which is that even if you sign it, you need at least 3 others, or at that point in time we had proposed a system with 7 notaries, so you need 6 others, or even if you sign this application, you can't sign the next one. And so the assumption was effectively like even if an SP participates as the notary and the SP, there's enough other faces in the mix, kind of like what you were describing for the previous issue, right?
Yeah,
So
true.
what I'm hearing from you is basically you think that the minimum number of 4 approving notaries is not enough, or maybe if there's a dissenting notary or like somebody disagrees with the application, there should be a role for that, which we don't have today.
Yeah, true.
I think that's my interpretation, and then like moving forward to the documentation that basically says you shouldn't be all 3 roles, I think is a safe way to go. I think just saying you can't be the notary and the SP everybody's already like circumventing that effectively. But if the whole community thinks that it makes sense to try and put that in the documentation, I'd love to figure out how we can also then follow through on that. My fear is basically introducing a lot of policy that we cannot enforce reduces the usefulness of future policy. That's my risk.
Okay, I got you. There's another question that I would like to get answered. Like when you said one round cannot be signed by one notary, do you mean it's like a technical impossible, or like more theoretically?
So in a multi-sig, you require at least 2 signatures. So even technically, you need at least 1 other person. Then from a policy standpoint, you need 3 other people.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Just a quick note here is that I think a lot of it is going to be fixed when we actually figure out the incentives for notaries, because right now we don't have like a good incentive structure for being a notary, and that's probably going to be fixed when we find an incentive, and then like the incentive is going to do all the work of actually like the mechanisms of balancing. Like,
yeah, I think that's right.
Structure.
I think that's right. So the initial hypothesis in the FIP that created Filecoin Plus and what came out of the lab at that time, the CryptoNet lab that proposed it was, Crypto Econ lab that proposed it was that notaries should be stake aligned, right? Like you have a lot of Filecoin, that's part of how you become a notary. You're working in a program that directly influences the perception and the usefulness of the network. And so the assumption is that you are long-term incentive aligned with the network because you want the network to succeed because you are a long-term stakeholder or participant. Now, a lot of people that have Filecoin and participate in this and care about the success of the network are the ones that are making it their full-time jobs, and that happens to be the storage providers. And that's why I think from an incentive standpoint, it's not the worst thing for a notary to be a storage provider either. Like that's fine. If that is a way in which they are incentivized to do a good job and move quickly, then that's okay. But then we need to put enough in the system that there's a check and a balance somewhere down the line. So like empowering the people that are disagreeing with the decisions, or setting policy that's like, don't do all of it, for example, are ways in which we can deter that. We can never prevent it. And so instead of preventing it, what we should take the approach is basically setting reasonable guidelines that make sense for the community, knowing that we can change those over time as an evolving community, tracking the abuse of those guidelines to the best of our abilities, and then actually having repercussions for that abuse.
Yeah, I don't think we should enforce it as a brew, like not at all. Maybe as a guideline, if there are people notice some nodes are doing some weird dealing or some connections, people could find it out and comment and flag the community. That would be a better way to do it. Yeah.
Good flags. I put the link here in the chat. I think what we're trying to do is kind of move this to the finish line. So if anybody had any additional context or thoughts, this would be the time to add it in that thread. We still have this plus one more, so maybe only allocating around 2-3 minutes for this at a really high level. Do you want to kind of talk about this GitHub issue? This came up on the last call as well.
Yeah. Hey guys, it's me again. About this proposal, like I already shared enough from my side on the proposal itself. But I made some change to the duration, and the revised version is lowering 90 days to 60, but with one variable. Yeah, Kevin, could you go down a bit? Yeah, this part. So I'm changing the duration to 6 plus X. X is defined as the number of days from the submission date, which is 4 September to the approved date of the proposal. I got this idea from the joke in the last governance call. It would be literally pointless if it takes 90 days to get it approved. And for me, I think I got a lot of comments here. Like people are saying like, oh, maybe we should take it as half a year and 60 days, 30 days, 7 days. From my point of view, I think 6 days is appropriate. And with X, is limiting the sorry for folks who are watching this right now and registering account at the moment. That will certainly block this kind of cheating behavior. So yeah, that's what I think.
Can I propose a recommendation for next steps for this one, if you don't mind? I think it'd be really interesting to just see the spread of current applications. Like we have, 300 of them or whatever. Just looking at when the account was created to when the application was filed and if it was approved, when it was approved. If there's a way that we can get that as a view, and then we can look at the ones that have a very narrow window and like look at their on-chain behavior and try to like, you can work in the trust and transparency working group and see if you, the group, think that, it looks like the ones that don't have historicity look like they might be more risky on chain behavior basis or less. If you can draw a correlation between that, then I think this is a very interesting change that we should push through. But we have the data. We don't need to guess. I think we should get the data.
Yeah, this is basically what you mentioned under the proposal, right? The reputation system for applicant as well.
That's different. That was an idea that I just was chatting around and thinking that to me is kind of like we need a social layer on top of GitHub even, right? That says, okay, like when Caro here posts something, Caro here has posted 10 other things. So this is a person that has some reputation in the community, which is different than like, if I don't know, Caro not here shows up tomorrow and like starts saying, oh, this is bad, don't do it, and like says no to everything that Caro here is saying. But Caro not here has never existed in the community, has no reputation, has no proof of participation in the community. Then the rest of us know, okay, like this is just somebody who's here to disagree with Caro. That doesn't mean that we have to listen or this is like a high leverage input. It's just like an arbitrary anonymous person versus somebody who has earned a lot of reputation in the Filecoin Plus community, and we all know that they understand it. And so it's not to say that we shouldn't listen to new opinions, but more that we should weigh the ones that have earned the weight better over time, and give people a reason and incentive to stick with the program long term and establish themselves in the community. That to me is a different problem than I opened up a new GitHub application to apply for data cap. We have data on that one. We should look at that data, and I think we should use data to pitch this and decide how to move forward.
Yeah, like for me, I do love the idea about the reputation system, but I don't know how exactly is that gonna be like built, like how the technical dependency would be and how long will it take. But I think it would be great if we can have that as a discussion proposal somewhere as well.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm going to say this one really quick. That way we save more time. We tried having the second governance call in August at a different time shift. We had greater participation. There was a question on why did we move back? We are going to float feedback from the folks that came to that call. And during the fourth round of elections, ask the majority of the notary population what time works best. So this issue was not dead. I wanted to bring this back up. This will probably be discussed more during the second call, but just wanted to have a slide deck. Deep, I think we have time to pass the floor over to you for beacon updates. I've got the issue up if you'd like to share it. Otherwise, I can just have this screen.
I think we can just do a really quick one, and I think that there was a one client application that we can keep 5 minutes for if you'd like as well. Eric's in the call. Eric, hey, so there's a few things that we went back and forth on. If it's okay with you, can I share some like summary of our conversation, put it in the comment, and then recommend that we move forward with the initial allocation? Do you want to share your version of it? I don't know. Effectively, like I think there's information that was to the community. There's information that was provided to me over email privately because I was asking a lot of questions that was not shared on the comment side, but I don't think it's particularly sensitive. And so I just want to figure out with Eric, like, let's please post that, share that with a group of notaries that are doing the due diligence, and then let's move forward.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Steve. I think you can present it through, I think I list all the informations, no matter through GitHub or through emails. I think you can share to the communities.
Great. So then I'm going to post
Yep,
a comment on that today and then recommend moving forward with the initial allocation so we can at least get moving, and then we can see what people say.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. Okay. Kira, if you want to, I don't know if you have that client that wanted to present or no.
Yeah, Huidi-Data, we have the video. I'm going to share it in the Notaries channel. Would you like to speak to your application at all? All right, and those of you on the call watching, they submitted a video. I will link it in our application as well as Notaries if you want to watch, just kind of explaining what their project is, what they're looking for as far as like any kind of signatures or any questions to kind of get ahead of it, but just making themselves known as like very active, very much looking for a tie-in. To kind of get back to some of the questions that just came into Slack before we give you the 2 minutes. Yes, some of the governance team will be in Phil Lisbon, if not all of us. Very much looking forward to that. And we'll probably most definitely have a Phil Plus session there. And then there was another question about application 571 or proposal. We'll follow up with you offline. I think RG will be hitting that one and just kind of giving you some talking points to come back to that. So with that, pending any notes, we'll give you 2 minutes back. Was there anything else anybody wanted to flag before we sign off? All right. Well, this is September 20th. Oh, Alex, you got 1 moment. Go ahead.
Yeah, 1 minute. I guess one topic that I just wanna get in here, just so we can start thinking about, is actually having another governance team that is not focused only on notaries, but focused on Filecoin Plus as like a more broad sense, and having a more discussion around the processes involved in the Filecoin Plus program as a whole, especially if you're thinking about actually changing a lot of what a notary is, and like maybe we can create new roles and whatnot. So having another group that is focused on only the Filecoin Plus program as a general thing is probably something that we will end up needing. And
so that's what we are. I'm sorry, just to interrupt. So I focus on notaries and community, but along with Galen, who focuses on large data sets, RG, who focuses on the trust and transparency element, and Deep, who's focused on like the deal size and the unification. Then we also have the forks, like Kevin, who presented the E-Fil Plus program for the enterprise, speaking of it. So yeah, those groups are up. Those are ready. And if you're keen to participate, please link up with RG, please link up with KZ. They are very much looking for those proposals, and we'll get you set on that. Sweet, my man. All right, well, we have 90 seconds left. I think that's enough. Remember, if there's any topics that you'd like to see in these discussions, we post the GitHub every week after the call, so we'll be up for 2 weeks. Just add a line item and we'll make sure to save you time. Other than that, thanks for coming, and we'll see you guys on the next call in a few hours. Cheers.
Thanks. Yeah.
Welcome to the second part of the September 20th Notary Governance Call. We have a very small group today that's attending live. So this second recording that you're watching may be a modification of the first video and just kind of checking in on the key topics as we go through. Just as a friendly note, we always introduce ourselves, whether it's the first or second call. Deep, Galen, myself, and RG, we're your governance team. We can back you up with anything going on within the Fil Plus program, as well as some of the outline that are coming on board, like KZ, who's on the call, which we'll talk about that as we go. There's not only three of us. I'll spend time on this. And then Mark, you'll see in chat that there's a link to sign up to get your participation credit. It feels like a third grader teacher saying that, just as a way to kind of measure who's coming to these calls and the community engagement. So if you have a moment, fill that form out, and then we'll use that on your application form as we go forward.
You say it feels like a third grader teacher, but in more ways than just one.
Well, the nap time schedule. Well, here's the big update for you guys. Picnic Colon, you might be keen to know about this. We had a summit that took place last week, and we kind of came up with what does a general timeline look like for a very successful election. So some of the dates that we're going to be finalizing and pushing forward to the community come about where we're going to open up the fourth round of notary elections starting on November 1st through the 16th. The couple days that we have before that are going to be an event that we host in Lisbon. I'm working on the coordination for that now. And then we're going to make that open period probably around 3 weeks. And the lesson learned last time was that it took a while for applicants to get in, ask questions, and get back to us. Then you'll also see that the scoring period is around 3 weeks. What we found last time too is we would send notaries a question like, hey, can you please get back to us on your application? They would spend about 3 or 4 days to answer it, get back to us. And then within that folly of time, it ended up running out. So we're going to make that a little bit longer. So just as a heads up, if you are an existing notary, there is no need to reapply, but we're going to have some more baked in technical SLA participation that line up with how much involvement notaries would like to be going forward in the program. We're going to announce that as we go forward, like this model of tiers. How much participation are we looking for? I think the big thing to put on your radar is that election will be kicking off in November, and we'll be making much more formal announcements. So I'll pause. If Charles, thank you for joining the call. Mark, James, Jesse, if you guys had any questions about this.
During the re-election process with the scoring, is it possible if you're not redoing some of the new elections for existing notaries, can you get rescored higher though?
That's a good question. So if I'm hearing you correctly, Notary A was accepted as a notary in the third round of election, and they wish to reapply in this fourth round to have a higher score. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, or just a way to get reevaluated on their score. Doesn't have to be a reapplying.
I think it's a good question, and we just started to flush this out last week, so this might evolve a little bit. But I can definitely see a world where some of the less active notaries are asked to reapply to gauge their interest. Maybe their Slack handle's gone dark. Maybe they've been involved in some applications that were a little bit off the board. I'm sure that as we play around with this, we'll probably measure, like, do all existing notaries stay in their current capacity, or do any non-renewal notaries automatically drop down into this just kind of voting tier that we're going to flush out? I don't have a lot of answers for you right now, but I will in the coming days and probably by our next call. It's a good flag. Thanks for raising that.
Can I just add one more thing to that, Kerry?
Please.
So I think, James, there's a couple of additional things to watch out for. Number one, as Kerry is saying, I think the rubric is going to change. We need to introduce some different things that we want in terms of what we're collecting from notaries, how we're improving the quality of disclosures, how we're going to judge that stuff. So definite heavy +1 to what Kerry just said. Expect your own reaction to the process to guide your decision, and that's going to change a lot in the next few weeks as we start to push out some ideas we have and start to I also get ideas from Sunny, from Carol, from other community members that have contributed things on how we should track notaries in the past. But the second thing I wanted to add is there's implications to applying or not reapplying as well that we didn't really anticipate in the past, but are now realizing. Like, for example, if you didn't, there were some notaries that like didn't reapply in the last round, and because it wasn't explicit that notaries would get to continue onto the LDN V3 multi-sig, that turned into an issue, and people actually went against that to some extent. And so there'll be learnings from that. And so my mental model, if I were you looking at this, or for the notaries watching the recording, would be please pay close attention. It is more than likely that you're going to want to at least participate in the discussions themselves as they start to come up on changes to the rubric, because it'll influence your future likelihood of participation.
Thank you, Deep. Will do.
Keep the win as always. All right, so I guess stand by to stand by. We'll stand by. All right, so this was the big beefy agenda that we walked through this morning. To start off, we have the 2 FIPs. We'll talk about these that are currently in open discussion. Just point you to the directory to vote as a last call. We have an update from RG as far as trust and transparency and how we're putting together that meeting. We also have E-Fil Plus. KZ's on the line to just kind of introduce that program and ask any questions that you may have, or kind of an update on when they're going to meet and get involved. And then the majority of our time was spent on the proposal discussions. What we were trying to do is put those all to bed with like, what are those open that we could close out, and then ideally have a clean slate going forward. So it's kind of a last chance to talk about those or flag any concerns that you may have. Also checking in on the call time. Right now we have very low engagement. So maybe this is something that definitely needs to be reinvigorated to make sure that we're giving a time that fills the best people's schedule as we go forward. And Deep has an update on Beacon. So with that, Deep, can I turn it over to you for anything you might want to share or talk about from the FIPS?
Yeah, this group of people is disproportionately involved and knowledgeable. So for those of you checking out the recording, I'd suggest you go listen to the deeper analysis in the morning section, though theoretically you heard that to get to this point in the recording. But if you didn't, then wind all the way back. But TLDR for the people that are active in this call right now. FIP 36, as you know, has gone to a vote. There was a pretty good blog post from the Filecoin Foundation sort of outlining the 2 main deciding points and sort of what the controversy was or where the disagreement was. And so I urge you guys to check that out, and then please participate in the vote. It's an exercise in governance regardless of what the outcome is. And so Phil poll is live right now on FIP 36. I believe it's Phil poll number 16, maybe in URL. Yeah, it is. I'm dropping in the link in chat. But yeah, this is the one where they're trying to introduce a 3.5-year multiplier, linearly scaling with time to incentivize longer-term network alignment with the network. And so check this out. Please vote if you haven't. Always good to have participation in decision making. I think it'll be useful as well for setting precedents and how we handle complex FIPs in the future as well. On FIP 45, it looks like things are just trending towards getting merged in. Last week, our team got together and spent a bunch of time reading through the FIP itself and sort of just understanding like what it meant and what the content was, because as it's written, it is slightly complex. And so my recommendation to you would be give this a skim if you can. Let us know if you have any questions or anything seems like massively awry. I and folks on our team will be following up with the FIP authors and posting some issues and comments with some stuff that I think we'd like to see adjusted in order for this to be a smooth transition. But overall, it feels relatively non-controversial and not really impacting us for several months anyway. This is more just like setting us up for future interesting use cases, which is usually a good thing. And so we're expecting for this one to go through this FIP 45, not the one that Kira has on screen right now. Kira, I'm talking about the Phil Plus one. I dropped the link in chat to the actual FIP. So at this point, the discussion is actually happening on the FIP draft itself. So yeah, if you've got some time to spare, give that a read, and please drop your comments either as a PR if you can. If not, open up an issue. I think that seems to be the best practice in terms of moving forward. Thank you.
RG.
Yeah. So I updated the slide, but I think it hasn't been reflected. But essentially, we are kicking off the Trust and Transparency Working Group. Again, I think Jesse, James, you guys have been involved. Charles and Mark, more than welcome to join. The link was here. I also recently posted in the Phil Plus channel. But essentially, the idea is we'll be holding bi-weekly calls where the main kind of focus area is talking about data cap abuse, but I also want this to be a space where, if there are certain applications that are blocked for that specific reason, those can be brought up here instead of governance calls, and we can look to unblock those or discuss those with the community. So that's where we're at. Since the morning, I've proposed 2 times. So those are on Tuesdays, again, 2 times, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. You can find the times in the channel as well. So yeah, more than welcome. I shared a Google form as well where you can we can share your email and I can add you to the invite. And that also has a section to provide suggestions on what you would like to what you would like out of the working group calls and the group as well. So feel free, and anyone watching the recording, same goes for you. You can find the link to the group as well as the Google form on the Phil Plus channel, and you can also join the Trust and Transparency Slack channel. Those are the main updates on the trust and transparency side of things.
RG, as you were going through it, I grabbed that updated slide,
Perfect.
so it should be current and correct.
Yeah, sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, great. So for the FIP Plus Enterprise, I do have some. I would like. We are talking about LDN, right? So how about the small data, for example, terabytes or less, 50 terabytes? Does the notaries have the privilege to assign those now? Because we see like everybody is working on large data set. Actually, there are also some small data set requests, and so I'm not sure like are we going to put those on pipeline, or we are still like put the large data set processing first.
Yeah. So just to confirm, your question is, will this trust and transparency working group also look after direct allocations or only large data sets, right?
Yeah, I mean like a small one, for example, less than 100 terabytes. So that because I can see like there is because it was not a big issue before, but now it become an issue now. So if you look at the Filecoin storage, there's actually no regular deal, only verified deal, which means that if I make people feeling that if I cannot get a verified deal, I prefer not store. Then it becomes an issue. How about the private data? Previously, like private data can go through the regular deal, but nobody actually goes to regular deal. And I believe, sorry, I didn't test, but I believe like a lots of storage provider actually reject those because there's no CC sector storage provider now. So there's no regular. And the mechanism now become a little bit, let's say like specific at this moment. People need a verified deal, even in private data, otherwise it cannot store. This is something like because we were working on we're doing the data hackathon. So we see like there was a net drive, some network drive, but then ask us like if I cannot get the data cap, how can I continue to store the on Filecoin network, or even pay the storage not enough? People want to accept that. So this is something like I think we maybe needed to think about small allocation for small data sets. Yeah, just something I'm thinking now.
Yeah, no, that's thanks for raising that. I think I can answer your first question on the Trust and Transparency Working Group. Will definitely be open to any data cap abuse issues that come from direct allocations. So yeah, that's more than welcome. I think KZ will be able to answer any question that about like the Phil Plus side, the encrypted data, that thing you mentioned. On the broad strokes, I think what I'm hearing is right now SPs are rejecting kind of non-verified deals. That's a little bit out of my scope, but I don't know if Deep
yeah, I'd love to chat about that. Basically, Charles, I think your identification is correct that there's like a few different pipelines, right? And when data cap gets that small, we're not seeing that much traction or support for like that kind of direct notary allocation thing. So I would love to instead suggest we look at the stats. So I just pulled up the dashboard, right? If you look at the requests coming into direct notary allocations, which typically tend to be at that size of tens of tebibytes, I see 2,000 applications received in total, 326 in the 326 approved total. And in the last 30 days, I see 178 for direct versus 181 for LDN. And so it's a comparable amount of throughput today. However, on the client onboarding side, we know that clients send a spam request, right? Like we've seen, like people will come and like send 5 requests out or 4 requests out. So if we were to divide this by 5, it's like 40-ish clients like coming in per month, let's say. So I do think it makes sense to continue supporting these people. And in a way, I think that this is kind of like that higher risk pool that a notary can take a chance on, right? Like if a client comes in and is struggling with an LDN application, going directly to a notary for a smaller amount of data cap is a quick way to earn reputation and prove that they're doing the right thing. And so I see it more and more as a way for that testing scenario, for that low throughput validation POC type scenario, or for the you need to earn trust in a different way because you're unable to do this at scale with your LDN application. And so my current thinking is to recommend continuing it in the form that it is today. I think long term, it doesn't really make that much sense. Instead, what we need to do is better align the giving of data cap with the amount of trust being earned by that client. And it should eventually turn into, hey, if you're providing very little information about yourself or you're going through a very lightweight process, then in return, you get access to a very small amount of data cap. And might be revolving, but it's always good to have a revolving loan with even more credit on it, correct? And so it's like a 1 tebibyte at a time restricts your onboarding rate compared to 100 or 200 tebibytes at a time. And I think that's where this fits into the picture, which is lower requirements, lower expectations, easier forms of KYC, more standardized process up front for smaller amounts of data cap. And so over time, I think a lot of these things will turn into this sort of unified experience for a client, which is a menu of like, what are the things you're willing to show to prove who you are to the network and how are you establishing trust? And the data cap access that you have is commensurate to how you're able to earn that trust. And we minimize the upfront friction of interaction between the entities and instead trust the on-chain data more and more. And so the work that RG is investing in today is to build really robust opinions on how we can look at on-chain data to make assumptions about the quality and the trustworthiness of a client over time. So that the notaries then start to get much more involved when the system says, hey, this one looks like we need human opinion, or we need somebody to get involved, because subjective analysis is required, because objectively speaking, this might be a case of questionable intent. I just said a lot of words, but hopefully some of them made sense. Charles is nodding. That's usually a good thing. I'll take it.
Oh, thank you.
All right. KZ, are you free to
Yes.
walk us through?
Thank you. And speaking of trust, this, sorry, I think you're on the wrong slide, Kev. There you go. Speaking of trust, the E-Fil Plus pilot is all about building trust in the applications. And so I see Charles, Jesse, James. We've met in person. Darlene and Mark, I haven't met you, but I'm Kevin from PL, project lead for this E-Fil Plus project. We spent the past few months planning, getting this ready to go live, and we have around 25 SPs signed up to go. Have a notary working group that are active and willing to participate in approving these applications, and we're getting ready to kick this off in a few weeks. But the update for tonight is that I submitted a proposal that includes all the details, highlighting, you know, what the changes will make to the Fil Plus process. So feel free to check that out. You know, that's really my update for tonight. I mean, we added some layers of checking the business, of asking for more information from the client up front, asking for the lead SP and the client to submit as much information as they can related to the project to make it transparent and more trustworthy, to be more easily approved by the notary working group. So I'm hoping to get that looked over the next week and a half from anyone in the community. and open to any feedback or ideas that people have. So feel free to jump into the GitHub item and give me some feedback there. And I'm also starting, similar to RG on the trust and transparency side, I'm starting some biweekly working group calls. Starting next Tuesday, I'll have working group calls where you feel free to join. I want it to be almost like office hours for everyone involved in the project. It can be SPs, notaries, community members who have questions, ideas, thoughts. I want everyone to be working together here to get the pilot off the ground, get people's applications, looking good, feeling good, everyone's on board, and getting some processes cleaned up and automated where we can. So with that, I'll pause. All right. Like I said, yeah, feel free to check out the GitHub repo. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me online.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. So for those of you on the call, we spent a lot of time in the morning just discussing these. So if you want to see those videos and hear what other people are thinking, I'll link that later tonight, early tomorrow morning. So that's live on YouTube. But just as a quick check-in, maybe to get your input, if there's anything you wanted to add to the ticket. This one came through, we briefly mentioned it. Notaries that had applied in the second round of election were not able to be added to the LDN V3. So this proposal was to include them on it. There was some lively discussion from the community about bringing in active notaries onto this new system. We are discontinuing it. It won't go through just for the fact that the two notaries just decided that, hey, we'll just wait. It's not worth it to kind of push back against this. But the larger issue at hand is writing the elections in a way that any technological improvements can be included to existing notaries without always having to have an election, just to update some of these process-oriented. So these two notaries will not be added to the LDN V3. They will continue to direct sign. And then when the next round of elections, they're going to decide if they want to continue. So hearing that, I just wanted to flag for any discussion. If there's anything, otherwise we'll move on to the next. All right. We had Caro on the call this morning. She kind of spoke to this. Maybe I kick it off, and Deep, RG, KZ, if there's anything you want to add, feel free to talk over me or just jump in. So essentially, we had this LDN application. Essentially, what we're talking about is like, how do we distribute the load of these notaries applications on the LDN without making it burdensome while still improving the trust and regulation? So this one had some back and forth. The proposed solution that you see came from the actual issue 587. It's kind of been dormant for a few days, and we were just looking to pick this up before we had any movement. So if you've seen this application, if you have any proposals, now would be kind of that last call for any verbal that you wanted to add before we take this to a finalization in the repo.
I can speak of it. I think so. Of course, you can look at the discussion. I think clearly, 12 notaries for that's a lot. I don't think that makes sense. I think since then, the proposal has evolved to lessen the requirement, where we have different regions. I think we do have a challenge right now, and I think some of this could be potentially be addressed with the next round of notary elections, where we can be more mindful of kind of some of the requirements that we are putting forward for who to become a notary. But I think as of today, I think especially given where we want to head with data cap, looking at on-chain behavior and instead of blocking data cap approval at the start, I think this proposal, as things stand today, might add some value. But I think in the medium to long term, I think the goal is definitely for us to empower the notaries to look at the behavior on chain and things like risk scores instead of providing strict requirements of what consists of approval. So I think that's my kind of thought on this.
And then continuing off of that, RG, you pointed out the 12 notaries part. I'm looking at the storage provider requirements, and those seem interesting as well. Probably need to work on the details, and I'll add a comment into the GitHub proposal itself. But the number of nodes is vague. Could probably be worked on a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Flag.
Yeah.
James, thanks for putting final thought. We're going to probably close these out end of week, so I appreciate you putting that on as we move to ratify that. This one was seemingly straightforward at the start, had a lot of discussion as it came forward, and we'll probably be looking at this in the 4th round of notary elections, to be honest. But this also is under the vein of like, how are we disclosing the relationships that take place between applicants, between notaries, between storage providers, and like having some standardized system for disclosing that. So at the root of this issue was disclosure of relationships in 602. This had some back and forth. The post that you see here linked in the slide deck came through, about 6 days ago. And this is kind of outlining the pros and cons. This is, again, one of those that we might bake into the 4th round of elections just to standardize it. But the more input we have in the issue, the more helpful. So if you guys have had a chance to read this, I'd be very keen to hear your thoughts on why this was feasible or why this not be feasible. And also Deep and RG, if you want to kind of input from the PL and trust and transparency side, very valuable.
We could do a quick recap of the conversation this morning, but I think it's not significantly different than it was the last time this topic came up. I think it was primarily just along the lines of like, it's really, really hard to do this. And people that want to cheat the system will continue to find a way to cheaply cheat the system. And so, excuse me, we got to design these outcomes in a way where we can actually get from the community what we're interested in seeing, rather than just motivating a way in which we increase the friction for the people who are trying to do the right thing. And so I think that that's kind of where this particular proposal is still kind of figuring out, it's sort of next steps. But I definitely think the heart is in the right place, and it would be great to figure out how we can get something like this actually working. In the meantime, I think the recommendation, at least from in my opinion, is that we should probably move forward with doing like a documentation based approach first, which is like let's create the standards from a principle standpoint as opposed to from an enforcement standpoint, and say things like, hey, it doesn't make sense for a notary to be both, like it doesn't make sense for a single entity to be all three, like client, notary, and SP on a particular application and stuff like that, and put out those kinds of guidelines, because then at least we can have conversations where we see that and can start to address that. But then we also went down like this immense rabbit hole on incentives and how like ultimately like once notary incentives look a little bit different over time, then this might also be less of a challenge. And I kind of agree with that, ascribe to that mentality overall, where right now part of the incentive alignment is that you are a bag holder or a stakeholder of Phil and you want to see it go and do well as a project and as a token, and Phil Plus is a really good way to do that. And so in this case, effectively, we have this setup where a lot of the people who are shepherding good work on the network also happen to be search providers, also happen to have a lot of tokens and therefore qualify to be notaries. And so it's really, really hard to disentangle the different institutions that sort of come together and have overlap on this front. And so I think the challenge of this one is effectively to say, like, how can we actually set guidelines versus rules? And I think we move towards saying guidelines, and it's like, what are reasonable guidelines that we should set that actually result in incentive alignment across the community and have some amount of enforceability, because empty guidelines also are not super productive. And so I think the proposal will continue to evolve before it reaches a point where I think it's ready to be like maybe merged in, if I can call it that. RG, is there anything else that you want to add?
No, I think that sums it up pretty well.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. This last one had to do with the GitHub applications and how we looked at dealing with some of the headache that came from working with GitHub. So right now we have a flag for fraud. Right now we have a flag for like how long these accounts have been created. There's no right answer as far as how we're doing this. This conversation had a lot, or excuse me, this proposal had a lot of conversation that went with it. So flagging this issue, if you haven't had a chance to look, 608, and this really comes down to how are we looking at diligence in these LDN applications? Is it waiting for a GitHub application to have 90 days before we move on it? Is it having some additional set of requirement? So again, just a flag, if you haven't seen this one, there's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of really good ideas floated. And this is one of those last calls before we kind of take this to the mat. So I'll pause and see if anyone has additional clarifications or input. All right, governance meeting time. So the 5 or 6 of us that are on the call right now are probably seeing that attendance has vastly dropped since August. In August, we ran a pilot, and the pilot was to measure how many people will come to the call if we pushed it back 2 hours. That pilot ended in September. We went back to the normal call. We had around 13, 14 people. And tonight, very clearly that those 13, 14 people have since dropped down. So it could be that they're expecting the call to happen 2 hours later, or it could be that this time frame just does not work. So I will probably give life to the issue that was proposed by FatMan as far as bringing this to light, as far as what is a conducive second time. There was also some discussion from RG, you might have saw this come through in the Fil Plus public channel, about having this meeting once a month and then having specific working groups to tackle other issues that come up. So that might self-solve this problem. But just as a quick line of feedback, we're definitely working on this and we're going to get some time frame that's conducive for everyone involved. But I'll pause and see if you guys have any input on like this time frame, if it works, if it doesn't, and then thought about pushing it back 2 hours. All right, then I'll update the ticket. We'll just keep going right along. Deep, I took a crack at this slide and it's obviously crack egg status. But if you want to speak to anything on Beacon or the updates from this morning.
I think TLDR for this is basically, we're going back and forth a bunch on this. I think there's still some open questions. I have a bunch of additional knowledge that was shared because I was asking a ton of questions to Eric and the client. I'm just going to dump a bunch of that publicly as well so that we can move forward. I know a ton of notaries have decided that they're interested in making a decision on this. I'd like to move this one to resolution. I think Eric and the client are both interested in seeing that happen. And so I'm going to put out everything that I have. And my recommendation will be probably just like, let's let the notaries decide and move forward like as soon as possible. And so if it turns out that they have enough notaries, we can probably have like the first tranche go out and see what it looks like on chain. I would ideally like a few additional guardrails around like how we are expecting that data to be retrievable. There are at least 1 or 2 hanging questions still for me. And so I'd like to see those answered as well. But TLDR from the morning, expect an update from me publicly, expect that we need a little bit more info from the application. And if you're a notary that agreed to observe this, we will be needing your input so that we can move forward on this application as soon as possible.
All right, we went through this pretty quick. We have time for any kind of issues that you want to raise. Charles, I see that you flagged something in Slack. We'll come back and make sure we get it. Before we do, I just wanted to flag, we had an applicant with an LDN who submitted a video. I'll be posting this in the Notary channel shortly, but just to kind of give them some airtime to flag this for bandwidth. It's issue number 974 from Filecoin-Data. And Filecoin-Data is looking at long-term data storage and artificial intelligence, machine learning. They have a 5-minute video and their application is open, looking for review and looking for process. So you'll see this come through in the next day or so in the Fil Plus Notary channel, and that'll be like a good way to kind of take a look at it. So with that, I'll kind of come back and see if there's anything that you guys wanted to talk about some of our remaining time. All right, with that, I'm going to stop sharing screen and I'm going to stop the call. If we want to hang out for a while, if there's anything we want to discuss, we'll just make it open time. So with that, I'll stop the recording. Thank you all for watching the September 20th Notary Governance Call.